I'm going back to my outline to start with when I was talking about differentiation and the fact that obligations in MEAs are the same for all parties, except where differentiation is considered due to the following: economic capacity, differences of ambition, commitment, staggering implementation timelines have been considered because of these differences between parties. Sometimes it's about contribution to environmental damage, that you've had a lot of that in UNFCCC, for example. But the economic capacity aspect of it, the differences of ambition, you hear a lot of this in the Montreal Protocol debates as well. And we all know that even with the commitments, the developing countries had a 10-year grace period to allow them to come on board. Of course, that had its own problems. By having that grace period, whatever was being phased out in Europe found its way in Africa. And it was not the work of governments, but it was the work of business, unscrupulous business people. And recently, when they were in Kigali, the issue was that countries agreed on phase out by 2020. Most of the developed countries wanted it. The HFCs, they were dealing with HFC, which is an alternative that is affecting climate change. So they agreed that the developed countries wanted it phased out by 2020. But developing countries reliant on industries that make refrigerants wanted it delayed at least to 2026. Now the issue is why. They negotiated the timelines for the purpose of protecting their industries. I think the professor told us sometimes it's about protecting their coal and such issues. So they can put forward their concerns, uniqueness, and expect reciprocal flexibility to be shown by other countries. So MEAs, that was just an example of the differentiation when in negotiations. But when you look at even the treaty itself, they are, with the old Kyoto, you had Annex 1 countries and the other countries. The issue of developed countries come up a lot. But of course, with the new Paris Agreement, you don't see that. And partly it's because some of the developing countries are also developed in a way. So there's that competition with the developed countries that if you allow the big developing countries, then their competitors are having an unfair advantage. So that is the reason. But in Montreal Protocol, you have Article 2 and Article 5 countries. So why is it that parties are joining the same treaty, but you have different kinds of obligations? It's because of that capacity. And sometimes the argument has been from developing countries that if all this was caused by industrialization and it's our turn to industrialize, what are we going to get in return if we now have to follow and get all these new technologies? And the technologies are so expensive and we can't afford them. So there are real issues that are being discussed there. So if you really want us to absorb the new standards, which we agree with, and leave the old standards maybe of coal or something like that, then what is the consideration? So those are the kind of issues that are being discussed at that level.